In this lecture, I want to talk about a little bit about the self keyword. So we can have a global and local variables or constants or functions, but there is a keyword called self, which you may have seen at some places. But if you don't know what that means, we're going to talk about it now. So what I'm going to do is to create a single view application called self keyword and click create, and I'm saving it into my Bootcamp folder. So let's go to our view controller, and here we are going to play with the code. So I'm going to create some variables and constants on top. So I'm going to say var name is equals to Bob. Yes, I like this name. Then we say let age, Bob's age, is equals to 25. So we have one variable and one constant here, which are global variables. Then I want to create another function, and my function is going to have a name, my first function. I just sake of this class, don't call your functions like this. I'm going to show you what's going on here. So we have a global variable name and Bob's age. And also in my function, I'm going to create two local variables for my function. So I'm going to say name var name is equals to Mike, and let Bob's age is equals to 16. So as you can see, our Xcode doesn't complain because we have global variables here and we have local variables here. The only warning it shows that we have created variable and constant and we are not using them, which is okay. So for example, now in my function, I want to access these two constants and variables. So if I say here print Bob's age, and if I want to say print name, so can you guess what it's going to print here? So let's run and see if you have guessed it correctly. I am running this on my iPhone 8 Plus, so let's run it on my iPhone 8. Actually, let's do this. So we have two options here. Either it's going to print Bob and age 25, or it's going to print Mike and age 16. So let's see which one is going to be true. And our application is installed. This is our splash screen and our view is running. There is nothing here visually to see. And as you can see, nothing prints out. So if you have guessed the first one or the second one, is both of them incorrect, and I will tell you why. Because when our application runs, we have some kind of function called my first function. So we have declared this function. But the problem is we never call this function. So if you don't call a function, doesn't matter what it has inside, it's not going to do anything unless you call it. So what we are going to do is we have this viewDidLoad function here that every time our viewDidLoad loads our view, the function here will be called. So here I can say my first function, and I can call my function, and this will now work. So let's rerun our application, because if we want to do something with our function, we need to first call it. Now let's see what it will print. And it prints the age of 16, and it prints Mike, because these are the local variables for this function, and when we are accessing them, it first checks inside our local variable, and if it doesn't find anything, then it's going to check for a global variable. So in our case, both local variables and global variable names are same, so as soon as it finds a locally variable with that name, it's using this, so it doesn't access the global variable. So what if we wanted to access the global variable in our function here that have the same name? So I can use the self keyword. So if I say self.Bob's age and then self.name, this will access the keywords that are inside our class. So this is the global variables there. If I run my application now, instead of 16 and Mike, it's going to print Bob and 25. So it says Bob and 25, because the self keyword, self actually means that whatever belongs to our class. So whatever is inside of our view controller class here, this is our self class here. So when we access the self Bob or self name, this is what we are accessing here. Another thing, it's actually the same for the functions. So imagine if we have this my first function, I can say when I'm calling my function, I can say self.myFirstFunction. So this is also perfectly normal, but in our case, it's not required to put my first function to have a self keyword in front of it, because inside our function viewDidLoad, we don't have other function declared with this name. So it will not find anything here, it will jump out and look inside our class. So for example, if we also can declare function inside the function, you can say func my first function, and we're going to print I am inside of function. So if I keep this code now, and if I call my first function here, it's actually going to print I am inside of function now. It's not going to go out and look for my first function there. My first function. I have a typo here. It's not same name. That's why it still calls the Bob and 25, because the names didn't match. So let's rerun. Now says I am inside of function. So this is what we are getting called, because our code never leaves the viewDidLoad. But if I say self.myFirstFunction, it's going to go out and call this function instead of the locally created function within a function. So you can see it prints 25 and Bob again. So this is just a way to show you what the self keyword means and in what cases we are going to use them.